are recording the service this morning. That way we can distribute the service to our other members who aren't online. So they will be able to share in this morning. So lovely to see you all. Tim, you're kicking us off this morning.
Yes. Morning, everybody. Really nice to see you this morning. Thank you for joining us. And some of us did get hair and makeup. I don't know whether you can tell, but
did you keep the receipt? Tim, I'm about to mute everybody. So
yes, that's a good idea.
Will you unmute yourself? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, let's do that. So, yes, thank you and good morning. I think this morning's service, we're kind of riffing off one sentence that Lorna said in our little Wednesday evening gathering this week. So I suppose, if nothing else, this comes with a warning that just be careful what you say to me or
Don't worry, we've taken the swear words out.
Yeah, because it may end up being a key part of a future service. So, on Wednesday night, Lorna said, I just hope that churches make some space to breathe. And we were obviously talking in the context of whether or not we might reopen chapel and all the other various conversations about churches finding ways to reopen around the country. And we'll come back to that a little bit later. But that image, I think, just really struck us. This image of, I hope we can make space to breathe. And so I hope we might find that an interesting and helpful way to approach our worship this morning. Morning, young ones. And so I think there's something really interesting about breathing, isn't there? Breathing is a really important sort of metaphor throughout the Bible. There's lots of people, lots of stories in which breath is important, and you can think right back to the very beginning and Genesis and God breathing life into the man that he's formed out of dust. Right there at the very beginning of creation, Adam is breathed into, and so begins the human race. Christine. And yet there's something also very sort of normal about breath, very everyday. It's a bodily function that we do without really noticing. And I think that's what really interested me when I was reflecting on it a little bit more, is that it's something that you don't have to think about, but that you can. You can hold your breath in the way that I can't physically think about my heart and stop it beating, or think about my liver and stop it working. It's a sort of automatic process, but it's still a process I can think about, I can notice. I wonder how often we notice our breathing. Apparently we take between about 12 and 20 breaths a minute, which means roughly about 20,000 breaths a day, somewhere between 17,000 and 30,000, depending on how shallow your breathing is or how much running around you've been doing. But I wonder how many of those 20-odd thousand you actually notice. I certainly haven't counted that many breaths in a day. If I've ever counted to 6 or 7 breaths in a day, then that's quite a miracle. So it's happening all the time, and yet we don't always notice it. There's also lots of evidence to suggest that we draw a lot of our energy and the energy our bodies need from oxygen, from our breathing. So actually, when, as we often do when we're busy or distracted or not really thinking, and we're kind of always breathing quite shallowly and just catching the breath so that we can get on with the next thing, we actually miss out on the goodness of that oxygen, of that breathing in. And so we might just be about to be joined. You guys coming? Hello. And so this kind of image of breath is helpful because it's both everyday and yet important, both something that happens automatically and something that we need to notice. And so that also got me thinking about how a few weeks ago, Martha saying good morning to you all. You can perhaps hear her breath, which is just climbed down the stairs. A few weeks ago, the world was brought to a standstill, wasn't it, by this moment of grief and anger and frustration and desire for change, when a young man in the USA, George Floyd, was killed by white police, black man killed by white police. And his last words were, "I can't breathe." And I wonder who else can't breathe at the moment. George Floyd's death helped us to again remember something we probably should have been aware of and talking about more anyway, about the fact that there are lots of black people around the country and the world, people of colour around the country and the world, who feel that they can't breathe, feel that they're not having their space to be themselves, to be able to breathe in and out as they would wish to. And we know that there are lots of people living in poverty, lots of people living with their own challenges, people forced to hide their identity or their sexual orientation, people who find themselves in abusive relationships, people who are being oppressed by systems and structures or people and workplaces and family members, and find themselves caught in a place where they can't breathe. So this morning, as we think about breath and how important it is for us, we want to also stand with all those, and perhaps some of us here on this Zoom call, who feel we can't breathe today, or perhaps we've got stories from our past where we feel we can't breathe or we couldn't breathe, and we went through that time. We see in the invitation of lockdown and of this space that's being created for us, a change to all of our rhythms, a space to breathe, a retreat space, a safe space. Many of you will be aware, Rob perhaps more than any, of the tradition that exists within Methodism for Methodist ministers to take sabbaticals, to go on about every 7 years, to take a long break away from the normal rhythm of ministry, usually about 3 months, and go away and reflect or do something creative or just do something different. And I think it really helped me the other day when I heard coronavirus described as a kind of sabbatical for the whole church, because actually so many of us have roles within the church which we've now been put on hold. If you're in charge of the flower rota, there's not very much you can do at the moment. If you were supposed to be making the tea and coffee, as Lorna so often does for us, actually that job's been taken away from you. And actually that sabbatical moment, we were reflecting that sabbatical moment is a suggestion that you know, excuse us a second, just a little juice spillage. Yes, so that, but a good sabbatical is one that you're changed by and renewed by and refreshed by, and you come back from with more energy, with more breath inside of you, more energy to give, more ability to enter back into the rhythms of breathing in and out helpfully. And so as we return from our sabbatical and we start to think about what that might look like, we were just really struck by this rhythm of breathing. And while so many of our normal rhythms have been taken away from us, have we noticed the one rhythm that we're all doing 20,000 times a day and perhaps forgetting about the simple rhythm of in and out, and in and out? Have you noticed that rhythm today, this week, this lockdown period? And that's what, to return again to where we started with that idea of noticing, because that's where I think the analogy for breath and the presence of God is helpful for us, because breath, like the presence of God, is always there, and we don't have to notice it. We can just keep taking the oxygen and crack on with our day-to-day lives. Or we can stop and we can notice the breathing. We can see the presence of God, but we do have to stop in order to do that. We do have to turn away from some of our distractions and the things that make us breathe quickly and shallowly, if that's a word. Shallower, thank you. So as we seek healthy rhythms and as we seek to return to whatever the new world will look like with healthier rhythms, maybe we could think about building systems and structures and keeping relationships and making friendships, and having a church where everybody felt they could breathe, where there was space for everyone to breathe, where those people who have said, I can't breathe, can come and find that there's oxygen to go around plenty. There's plenty of opportunity for us all to breathe deep. Maybe we can recreate a world where everyone has breath and where it doesn't take us a global pandemic to notice how important the simple rhythm of in and out is. In and out. In and out. Let's notice the rhythm this week. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Briefly reminded of that beautiful news slot on BBC this week. I don't know if any of you saw it, where this woman was being interviewed about what was happening in Leicester, and her 7-year-old daughter decided to come and join in and discuss the positioning of a picture of a unicorn on the bookshelves. It was absolutely brilliant. Very, very well handled, I thought, by the BBC newscaster, Christian Fraser. Absolutely brilliant. Right, thank you, Tim. Thanks for that. Now then, we're going to do EasyChurch breathing exercises this morning. There's a way to bring us together. We're going to try and harmonise through our breathing. So we're going to start. Now, I will unmute you all for it. That way we can just spot if there are any problems out there, and make sure we get a first responder on the scene. So we're going to. So I'm going to unmute you all when we're actually doing it. The first one is really, really very simple. Okay, so it's all through your nose, right? Don't breathe through your mouth. It's all through your nose. And so really simply, we're taking a breath in to a count of 4, and then a breath out to a count of 4. Couldn't be simpler, okay? So I'll just have to do the counting because I can't breathe and count at this, breathe in and count. It's not possible. It sounds strange. Yes, look.
Is it worth mentioning that we're having trouble sometimes with clueless unmuting? People look out.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, we found that on Zoom when we hit unmute everyone, it doesn't always unmute you at your end. So if you think you are still muted, press your button to unmute yourself. Doesn't matter so much for the first one, but it will for the next couple. Okay, so we're going to unmute you all now, if I can find the right button. Right, you should all be back in the room, and it looks to me like you are, but you may not be unmuted at your end. It's a foible of Zoom. Okay. So we're basically going in for a count of 4 and then out for a count of 4. Okay. So, and all through your nose. Don't use your mouth. It's cheating. All right. We're not having any of that. Okay. So already we're going to breathe in for a count of 4 and then breathe out for a count of 4. So here you go. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. How are we all feeling? More serene than we were 2 moments ago. Okay. There is something about focusing on this rhythm. Okay, our next one, it's the same pattern, but these are called bumblebee breaths. So what that means is you breathe in for a count of 4, and then you hum like a bumblebee for all you're worth with the breathing out of a count of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, then I'll keep on doing the counting, then I don't have to look like the bumblebee. Okay. I wonder why I suggested I was doing this bit, Tim. No.
Just realising now.
Okay. So here we go. These are the bumblebee breaths. We're breathing in with our nose for a count of 4 and humming out through our noses for a count of 4. So here goes. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hum it out.
Ready?
1, 2, 3, 4. Like being in a summer meadow. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4, and hum it out. 1, 3, 4. It's beautiful. One more time. Breathe in. 1,
Counting because we're buzzing so loudly.
3, 4, and hum it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's just so beautiful. Okay, third and final one. Okay, so these are called dragon breaths. Okay, so you breathe in through your nose for a count of 4, and this time you're allowed to use your mouth because you then spread your dragon wings, open your dragon mouth, stick out your dragon tongue, widen your dragon eyes, and fill the room you're in with hot fire. Okay, so I'll demonstrate. I don't mind being stupid. You go in 1, 2, 3, 4, then a dragon breath out. So therapeutic, honestly. This is amazing. Okay, so we're going to do our dragon breath. Trust me, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel better. So breathe in for 4 and then dragon breath out for 4. Okay, so here we go. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dragons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Dragons. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 1, 2, 3, 4. And dragon breath out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this recording will be all over social media by 1 p.m. I'm just saying. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, I'm gonna. Don't we? But don't we all? I mean, isn't that therapeutic? Okay, I'm gonna mute. Here goes. Okay, so as many of you, I think, will be thinking about, the church is at a very pivotal point. So lots of things have been happening and are about to happen. The government have announced that there's this easing of lockdown, and one of those things is that from today, churches may open for lots of different things other than just private prayer. So many churches are considering what that means to them, what that looks like, and all of the things that are to be borne in mind. So I'm just going to talk for a little while, and I need to just kind of set the scene. I can't hide the fact that what I'm about to say will reflect my personal views, but this is meant as a conversation starter. And once I've finished talking, then we will open up the floor and find out if any of you've got anything to throw into this pot, because I'd quite like by the end of this for us all to know kind of how we're feeling about this, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'll just kind of set the scene and then just go through where really, it's not only me, there's a few of us have talked about this with regard to Methley, but there will be reflections into your own churches as that goes. The Methodist Church has now responded to the government guidance, and the government guidance was issued at the beginning of last week, and I'll mention some of the things that are in that guidance in a second. But the Methodist Church have responded with their own set of guidance, which is what we now need to follow. And certainly within the circuit here, we're at a holding place, which is the circuit have said, don't open yet until there is some policy guidance from district and circuit. And we're waiting for that, and that will come out in the next week or so. But the Methodist Church themselves have said something which I think frames the way that maybe we're thinking. And it does say this: the government announced that places of worship can open in England from the 4th of July with restrictions. However, the decision to reopen a church needs serious consideration and a thorough understanding of what is required in terms of planning and health and safety requirements. There is no compulsion to reopen if managing trustees do not feel it can be done safely or it is too soon. As our guidance states, it needs to be well planned, both before the opening and kept under review once the building is in use. And then finally it says, do not assume that you can immediately do things as you used to do, and accept that saying no, or not yet, or not like this, can in themselves be positive decisions. Now, I read that and I kind of got a sense that was taking us somewhere without any final decisions. A summary of what we see as the important points for us here in Methley from the guidance and from what's been said from the church so far, in no particular order, is that there's to be no singing. That is fairly solid. Attendance records need to be kept of who comes. No food and drink reasonably, apart from the whole business of table service, like pubs are being asked to do. So any serving of teas and coffees would have to be like that. A one-way traffic system in church, so an indoor and an outdoor, and a route. The guidance very much continues to advise 2 meters as the sensible social distance. But of course, it does mention you can go to 1 meter plus, the plus being various mitigations, which, for example, may include face coverings or may include screens or whatever else. With those 2 things in mind, we've had the measuring tape out in Methley, and at 2 meters, the capacity is 13 seated, and at 1 meter plus, the capacity is more like 22. So that's the sort of size of things in our particular building. And of course, that would differ radically from church to church. For potentially busy events, it's okay. They are suggesting booking systems. So there has to be a way in which you can limit to the capacity and don't go over capacity. I found the guidance about those age 70 plus a little bit woolly, if I'm being honest. It says that those aged 70 plus are advised to stay at home. If they don't want to stay at home, they need this guidance explaining to them. Now, I found that not only woolly, but also a little bit patronising. There seemed to be a suggestion there that once you're over 70, you can't understand anything for yourself if you read it. But that is what the guidance I find on that section is, particularly woolly. And if anyone is still shielding, then those rules still apply and they would not be allowed to come. So bearing in mind all that, we then have taken a look at what goes on at Methley Methodist Church. And there are 3 groups of activities. There are 3 groups which use the building externally. So they don't include anyone from church. There are 3 groups a week that hire the building. 2 little art groups and 1 big singing group. So obviously the singing group simply couldn't happen because singing's not allowed. And the 2 art groups are an absolute possibility because I think there's about 6, I'm guessing, and they could comfortably get in and be socially distanced. And that external activity, we've done an analysis of how many hours are spent in the church each month, and they represent about 15% of the hours spent. In terms of worship activities, we have our Sunday morning worship, which is either EasyChurch, which we're in now, or other regular Sunday worship. And certainly if we were at 22, then most mornings we'd be okay. If we were at 13, we would be over capacity. So that's a tricky one for us. Big worship, the average congregation for big worship once a month is about 40. And so for me, I think that's simply a non-starter. I personally don't have the personal capacity to say to people, I'm sorry, you can't come to worship because we're full. So for me, the online option would be the one to continue with for now. Now, the external activity and the worship activity, both, we do study groups as well. And again, that would be touch and go, would both represent about 15% each of the hours spent. 70% of the hours spent in Methley, and there's a lot of hours spent in churches on outreach activities, and that is where church members do stuff to which Mr. and Mrs. J Public are invited, and that's, to be fair, it's the heart of what we do. And if we look at those activities in turn, Clueless Chorus is one, and sadly that will not be able to happen, both because it would be over capacity and we're not allowed to sing. Now, some would say it would be a blessing if the Clueless Chorus wasn't allowed to sing, but not me. Coffee mornings, we're very tough one, because some mornings we may be okay for capacity, certainly Saturdays, and some others we wouldn't, and that would be very difficult to say no to someone. And also for me, yes, come in, but you must sit there, and we need to know you write your name down, and we need to do this, and then we'll bring you a coffee, is simply not the way that we've chosen to do hospitality. So I find that one a challenging one. The craft group, once a week, would be over capacity. Tea time Thursdays, once a fortnight, too much food and drink, and I think too dangerous. We do various fundraising events, all of which would be over capacity. Our open mic night, there's no chance. We had just under 100 people in that small space at the last open mic night, so that doesn't stand a chance. And equally, Methley movies would always be over capacity. And fundamentally, because I guess we need to be asking ourselves the question, what are we returning to? And each church must ask itself the questions, what are we wanting to return to? And frankly, we've never done a thing in that chapel in the last 8 years since we reopened without we hand thrust somebody a tea or a coffee as they walk in. And it's the very nature of what we do. And frankly, going back to something that isn't that is not a yearning for what used to be. It just fundamentally goes against the grain of what it is we're trying to do, as does the notion of turning people away. So we've found ourselves in a very difficult place, and we've started to take soundings, and this morning is a continuation of that. And again, as I've said, the thing is being recorded, so we're talking to our members that aren't online and can't access these things, although they are seeing them once a week. They're getting them via DVD, but they're not obviously joining in online. But they're very much being involved, and we're trying to find out from our members and our adherents what they want, and whether they want to go back to things like that or whether it's not ready yet. It does clearly, if we say no, not yet, then it does leave us in a precarious financial position. But I've talked to Michael Roberts, the circuit treasurer, about that, and he knows where we are, and we will see if anything unfolds as far as that's concerned. But primarily, we're in a place where we feel, a number of us so far, and we will poll everybody, feel that it's too much too soon, not safe enough, and actually not preferable to go back to that version of the things that we do. Here endeth. I am now going to invite all of you, or don't worry, there's no pressure, you don't have to speak, but if you have a view on any of that with regard to here, with regard to your own church, with regard to the situation across the world. We come back across the country. We come back to where Lorna's sentence started us, which was, I hope churches make space to breathe. What does that mean? What does that look like? So I'd like to now invite any of you, if you would, to wave furiously at me, and I will unmute you and you can speak forth. Graham, you're first. Well done. Thank you. Let me just find you. We should be able to hear you now.
Yeah, one of the considerations is countenanced by a document that came out from the Connection on the 16th of July about safeguarding. 16th of June. And it's very strict about whose responsibility it is. It's the church council. Yeah. So any decisions about opening either for worship or for any activities has to be approved by them.
Correct.
Prior to this, who actually will do the safeguarding document for each of these activities? Because then that will have to be published to the church council itself. Mm-hmm. We're in a position at Central where we've had two activities that are legitimate. One is National Blood Service coming with blood donors, and we have a preschool. I produced a safeguarding document for our church using the guidelines that came out 2 months ago from the Methodist Church. And the National Health Service, the National Blood Transfusion Service, they produced their own safeguarding document, which had to dovetail with our church one. As it did, then we allowed the procedure to go ahead. Similarly, with the preschool, their safeguarding document had to fit in with the one that was prescribed by church, and it did. Well, that all happened before the safeguarding document came out, and all happened before it had to go to church council. Since then, we've got requests from Live at Home scheme who want to do a dinner at the door. We've got our food bank wants to restart, and waiting in the wings for September, a karate group, Tai Chi, and possibly other small groups like that, whose activities are very viable. They can do the space, they can produce safeguarding documents, I think, which will comply with our requirements. But it's a very long-winded process. And going back to the initial statement, the Church Council have to take responsibility.
Thank you, Graham. Adele.
I liked the idea of maybe having small services, but now you've said that, the fact that we might have to turn somebody away from a service is just unthinkable. And taking into consideration if some churches don't open up at all, and we did for some small services, you could potentially be turning somebody away from a service.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's really tricky.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Would anybody else like to offer anything that they feel on what we've said? Yes, Doreen. Just a second. Oh, nearly.
I'm unmuted now, I think.
We've got you now. Thank you, Doreen.
Thank you. Well, I'm at Renthorpe, the lettings secretary at Renthorpe, and we do have an awful lot of regular users who are outside the church. Therefore, we're having to go through a huge amount of safeguarding and risk assessment before we can even consider letting these groups come back into church. They're all champing at the bit wanting to come back because they've got their idea of how they can do things, but we're realizing it is very difficult for the church council, the trustees, to actually say yes, you can come back, because we are responsible. You know, the trustees are responsible in the end and must know exactly what's happening, and we're finding that quite a long process to put together, you know, the safeguarding and risk assessments to make sure that they can come back safely.
Is there a general
Our
feeling?
church is different to Methley in that we have a hall separate to the church. You know, well, it can be locked. As I say, the church can be locked.
What's the general feeling there amongst the people about whether it's good to open or not good to open yet?
Well, I think we've got a lot of people wanting to home church. Rob can probably come in on that one.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are wanting to get back.
Yeah.
I think there's a mixture of wanting to get back to be in shared worship,
Yeah.
but also wanting to get back to see physical faces that they want to say hello to.
Yeah.
And I think there's a genuine mix of people wanting to gather for that kind of personal side of worship where you're with others. And there are folks who are just lonely, who are just desperate to meet people.
Yeah.
I think similarly to Methley, Renthorpe is not a particularly large building. And perhaps Renthorpe has a stronger desire to get back because they want to sing. And because they can't sing, it goes back to that original question, which is, what are we coming back to?
Yeah.
What are we going to gain by being in a building with just, I think it's going to be about 15 or 16, even with the balcony. We can only get about 6 up in the balcony. What is it that we're coming back to that will be different or enhanced from what we're doing now?
Yeah.
Now, there will be folks, and I'll finish up, there will be folks who are not online, and I think they particularly would like to get back because they can see people physically.
Yes, look.
So interestingly, Kevin had a conversation yesterday with one of our church members who isn't online, but who gets the DVDs every week, who was saying, I'm not ready to go back yet. I don't want to go back when I can't hug people, when I can't sing, and I've got to keep that distance. I saw the news this morning, BBC Breakfast, and I don't know what cathedral it was they were in down in London, but it just looks so sad. All these seats 2 meters apart all the way around, and there's going to be one person at the front singing, and they could wave at one another when they shared the peace. There was if they had communion, it was going to be bread, and it just looked sad and distant and clinical, and yeah, that doesn't make me feel like it's something I want to kind of rush back to. I see Emma's hand up, so I'm going to be quick. It isn't just about the letting people into the space. It's about about their safety and things. It's about the cleanliness. It's about the toilets. It's about going in every time somebody's been in to make sure that we sanitize the place. I'm on a committee for our local playgroup in the village. There's just 3 of us on the committee, and I'm terrified at the prospect of when we go back and how we work out how many staff we can have and how we keep those children and families safe. It feels like a minefield to me. Yeah. So.
Emma?
Yeah, so much of my experience of worship at Methley and the whole community, and in the wider circuit as well, as a place of welcome, a place where people can just come and be and feel like, you know, the weight of the week is lifted and like we can lean on each other. And so the reason why I'm late, I apologise for that, is because I've come from our in-person worship in Copenhagen. Now, admittedly, we're in a different position and we are fortunate because we can go ahead, but we had a member this morning for whom it was their last service. This happens a lot because we're an international congregation, but she's moving to Malaga to be with her husband, and you could feel we had like a goodbye moment at the end of the service, and you could feel that it was our pastor was having to steel himself not to give her a hug, because she was in tears, she was upset, she was struggling. She's been here 15 years, and just the very idea that I think so much of what we do will be going against our natural instincts to be tactile with each other and to offer that kind of support, and the fact that you have to hold yourself back in what can be moments of real vulnerability it's a very, very difficult one. And I would say that the position that Methley is in, that the circuit is in, it's going to take away so much of our identity.
Thank you. Yeah, what are we going back to? Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, hello.
Well, I just want to say as well, we were talking about it before everyone joined, from just a few of us, and you know, talking about what was happening in London yesterday, people, you know, kind of out there, people want to get to the pubs and stuff like that. And, you know, just reflection on the fact that in Copenhagen, Emma's in a position where they can go back to worship. We, you know, whatever our politics are, whatever, the reality is, we were slow to act. And the figures for the UK are pretty appalling in comparison to a lot of the rest of the world and Europe. And we acted too late. And we really, in so many ways, must not act too early.
To go back.
You know, and rush to go back. And I recognise that people are lonely, as Rob mentioned. But maybe we need to, now things are relaxing a little bit, maybe we need to try and find ways of supporting people and encouraging people to support one another within the rules, you know, the kind of social bubbles and stuff like that. Encouraging people to be a little bit less afraid, trying to facilitate that if we can. There's an elderly lady I support who's in her 90s, visually impaired as well as impaired in lots of other ways, whose son is bedbound, and they've not hadn't seen one another for months. And because of the social bubble, I've started taking her over. So I take her in the car. We both wear masks when I've got her in the car and all the rest of it. But the reality was, you know, her son is very poorly man. She's a very elderly lady. They might never have seen one another again. They don't touch one another. They sit more than 2 meters apart, but they see one another. And maybe we need to do something about trying to help. Maybe that's part of our role, is trying to facilitate people to be less lonely in whatever way we can do that. You know,
we have talked long and hard about connection being what is important and what is at the heart of what we do. And so maybe that's the thing, instead of seeing this opportunity to actually get back into church, but to something that may not be very productive and wholesome, maybe the effort is into forming these different kinds of connections and making sure that no one's left behind. Graham. Oh, sorry, just a second. You're muted. Can you do it yourself or shall I do it? There we are.
Yeah. I was going to pick up that on exactly on that point. As we look to the future, we must look at what we've actually achieved over these last 4 months. And there's been an interconnection that's been closer and more widespread than ever church was before, particularly for us anyway, through the Zoom meetings, through the WhatsApp, through Facebook pages. For example, our ministers' connections, it doesn't just go out to our own church members, because we can pick it up through email, and we make sure that those who are not on email get a hard copy from a friend at church who's already got it. But those services actually go out onto the Pontefract Facebook page, and they're being picked up there, and that means they're going wider afield altogether. I was talking to a friend, Susan was talking to a friend we have down in Devon, and they have a congregation around about 30 odd. Last Sunday service went out to 400 people via the internet, being picked up through Facebook and through YouTube. That is a way forward. We're touching the community in a way that we never did before. We were closed, we were trapped in our church buildings. Yeah. And this is giving us a chance to escape. And we think positively about how this escape really means.
Graham, thank you. I think that's such a powerful point. Yes, Jeanette. Just a second, love. Yeah. Just a moment. Yeah. Oh, no. Really? I think we're both doing it. Can you try again, Jeanette, please? Thanks. Yeah, yep. Done it. Thanks, Tom.
I was just thinking about my mum. She goes to a Methodist church in Leicester, but because she hasn't got the laptop, hasn't even got the internet or anything at home, so she can't join in anything like this. She wouldn't be able to look at DVDs or anything. And somebody from the church does phone, but she's not been out of the house since March. My sister goes over, but Leicester's in lockdown again. Yes. I can't go down because if I go down, my sister can't cover because she's shielding. My sister she's not even seeing her own children, but she goes over to my mum's because my mum's not been out anyway. I don't know, reach people like my mum.
Yeah, that's hard. That is.
So, in our congregation, there are now, I think, 3 people who are not on the internet and have got internet access. Now, not everyone who's on the internet accesses our worship via the internet, so some of them still do get DVDs. And I did wonder, because 2 of the people out of the 3 have got computers but not internet, and I wondered if we could, if that's where we could support people with, if they wanted to have that, so that we could do that.
Yeah.
The 3rd person who hasn't got a computer, her grandson, and she doesn't know how to work a DVD player, but her grandson does go and put the DVDs on with her and sits and watches them with her, actually, even though he doesn't come to chapel. It is a difficult one, and I don't know the answers.
Yeah, I'm desperate to go down and see them all, but I can't.
No,
especially now Leicester's locked down again.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, and it makes me wonder whether we'll all be in lockdown again after what's happened today.
Yeah.
If the number rises or whatever they're taking it by, whether we'll all be just back to square one.
Well, I think it's quite possible. I saw a report yesterday that said that some areas in London were above 1, and that the average in the UK at the moment is between 0.7 and 0.9. Which, and I keep on saying it, but in comparison to Denmark, when they started opening up things again, it was 0.4, and then they went up to 0.8 and have gone back down again. We've never been at that 0.4. Yeah.
I mean, I went into Cass yesterday just to get some food shopping, and a man rode by on his back in the pedestrian area and spitting, coughing and spitting.
Oh,
So if you've got that to contend with.
Yeah. Listen, thank you very much, everyone. We do appreciate all that feedback, good, bad and ugly, and it's good to bounce these ideas off each other, and there's been some fabulous thoughts brought forward there this morning, so thank you all. Let's keep on pondering and as we move forward and support each other through this. Tim?
Thanks, Kev. Yeah, and thank you all for sharing so honestly. I think it's really helpful for us all to keep thinking about what we can do. And I think just to bring us back round to our big theme of breathing, and just try to find space to breathe and honour those rhythms within all of that conversation, and finding ways to keep doing that. So we thought we'd just, just sort of close, semi-close, bring it towards a close, just by praying together, and as we pray, using that rhythm of breathing as a way of praying, as a way of praying together. So you might like to close your eyes, you might like to turn your Zoom camera off if you know how to do that. I've occasionally been in a few meetings where it's actually helpful not to be watched being prayed. How am I trying to say that? Watched whilst you're praying. No, that'll do. But equally, you might like to just close your eyes and kind of feel the moment, because we want to return to that space of the breathe rhythm. So let's just slow our breath down. Let's just notice again the rhythm of in and out. Might like to just breathe in and hold it, and breathe out. Breathe in, hold it, and then breathe out. And as you pray, just listen to the rhythm of that breathing. You breathe in all that is good around you, all that is beautiful. Breathe in the fresh morning air this day. And as you breathe out all of the negativity, all of the pain, all of the disappointment that you carry with you this morning. Breathe in God. Breathe in all that is holy about creation. Breathe in all that is wholesome, all that is peaceful, all that is good. And breathe out evil. Breathe out temptation, the desire for selfishness and self-satisfaction.
Look, Mum. Cow.
Breathe in hope. purity, a belief that a better world is possible. And breathe out the failings of this week. Breathe out the guilt that you carry, the times that you haven't always done the good you'd have liked to have done, and sometimes done the things you wish you hadn't. Breathe in forgiveness and acceptance. Breathe in a living, loving God who hopes all things, believes all things, forgives all things. Breathe out pain. Breathe out the agony of the news this week and the tears of our world. Breathe in hope and a desire to see the world remade in your image, oh God. Breathe out anxiety and all that limits us or holds us back. Breathe in love. Breathe out hatred. Breathe in God. And breathe out pain. And be blessed. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Tim. Right, let's close with a short song. You should have some words which were on the email or on the link or whatever. If not, it's in Singing the Faith if you've got it, 370. If not, just hum. Breathe on me, breath of God. Fill me with life anew, that I may love what thou dost love, and do what thou wouldst do. Breathe on me, breath of God, until my heart is pure, until with thee I will, one will, to do and to enjoy. Breathe on me, breath of God, blend all my soul with thine, until this earthly part of me glows with thy fire divine. Breathe on me, breath of God, so shall I never die, but live with thee the perfect life of thine eternity. Thank you all for this morning. You should be unmuted. If you're not at your end, please do it so that we can share the grace together to close. So thank you all so much. May the grace of our Lord Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all forevermore. Thank you all very much. Have a lovely Sunday and see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
The words you sang were different to the